Have you ever felt like you write repetitive and predictable chord progressions? I know that I felt that way at times. I'm talking about chord progressions that sound like this. Well, in this video, we're going to talk about two compositional techniques that you can use to help create unexpected harmonic moments in your chord progressions. To create an unexpected moment, we first need to create an expectation and then break that expectation in a musical way. Let me show you an example. This is a chord progression from the main melody of my song, Star Circuit 7. Let's take a listen and think about what the chord progression sounds like to you and how I create harmonic expectation. So in order to create the expectation, I heavily utilize chords within a diatonic sound. Diatonic means belonging to one scale. In particular, the scale we're talking about today is the A flat major scale. Let's take a listen to this scale just by itself. Now, if we take that scale and we build a triad on every single step of the scale, we get the diatonic chords of A flat major. These are the most natural sounding chords for this scale, and the use of them creates an expectation of more of these natural sounds. Let's take a listen. In the first half of this chord progression from my song, we draw from these sounds very strongly, and this affirms the A flat majorness of the chord progression. You'll notice especially in this walk up in the first four chords, we're only using diatonic sounds. It sounds very similar to this chord progression, the diatonic sounds of A flat major chord progression. Let's take a listen to this version of a walk up. All diatonic sounds. The first non-diatonic sound where we break that expectation comes with this chord over here, the C7 sharp 9 chord. Functionally, this is acting as a dominant chord in a compositional technique called tonicization. Tonicization is the process of using a secondary dominant chord to highlight a chord other than the tonic, and this creates a temporary key center change. Specifically, we're highlighting this chord, F minor 7, and approaching it from its fifth. The E natural in this C7 chord is the first note that's outside of our scale. So it's not any of these notes here. It's right in the middle, right here. And this sound brings in color that comes outside of the world of A flat major. Let me explain in more detail how to find this chord. So the first step is to choose which chord you want to tonicize, which is this F minor 7 sound. And then we take a look at this scale. The scale happens to go like this. Of these notes, we're going to look for the fifth one. And then this note becomes the root of our dominant chord. We build a chord off of the diatonic sounds of the scale. And we got 5 to 1 in the key of F major. And that's how you find that. The cool thing about tonicization is that it's not only creating a temporary key center shift, it also almost always utilizes a non-diatonic note because this C7 chord is coming from F and not A flat. As I mentioned before, the E natural is this note which falls outside of our A flat major world. And because of that, it's an unexpected and more colorful sound than we're used to, something that's unexpected. Let's compare this resolution with what it would sound like if I used the diatonic counterpart. The more boring diatonic counterpart would be to use the C minor chord, which is the third chord in our diatonic A flat major sound. So the diatonic chord progression, C minor to F minor 7, would sound something like this. However, instead of this minor sound, we have a major third. So just to really emphasize it, I'm going to forget the sharp 9 for now, and I'm just going to play C7 to F minor. And that sounds like this. So quickly minor to minor 7 versus. So already you can see that that E natural is very bright and it's out of the key. It creates a lot of color. Now that we've dissected this tonicization nature of this chord, we're going to take a closer look at the sharp 9 sonority. Why do you think that this sharp 9 chord sounds so beautiful? When dominant chords are utilized in functional harmony, they occur right before a resolution, like right here. Because of this, because we know that we need to resolve, and especially in a jazz context, you can utilize a ton of dissonant harmonic skullduggery, understanding that the more dissonant the sound, the sweeter the resolution is. Of these dissonant sounds, sharp 9 is one of my favorite because of the dissonance created between the natural third and the sharp 9. We have the major third, and we also have the flat third, or sharp 9, in the same chord. This interval is dissonant and has a little bit of rub, and that's resolved when we resolve our chord. The inclusion of the natural and flat third also occurs in the blues, in which you can take dominant chords and play minor or bluesy language on top of that. Perhaps that's why I like this dissonance so much. I especially like to use these sharp 9 chords in minor resolutions, which is what I do here. Let's get back on track and take a look at the rest of this chord progression. Besides this B flat 7 chord, which I'm going to talk about in another video, this is really modal interchange. We're going to take a look at the other chords in the rest of this chord progression. There's 2 other chords other than this B flat 7 that use outside sounds. And as I play this chord progression for you slowly, I want you to see if you can hear or see which ones utilize those outside sounds. So the end of this section utilizes a pretty standard jazz chord progression. I especially like this F7 chord, which has a flat 9 and a sharp 9 in the same chord. In this chord in particular, the A natural of this dominant chord lies outside of the key. Just like before with the C7 sharp 9 chord, we're tonicizing a diatonic chord of A flat major. In this case, we're tonicizing our B flat minor 7. We're approaching it from its fifth, which carries this outside of key note, this A natural. The tonicization of this B flat minor 7 brings a new color from outside the key. It creates the illusion of moving our key center to B flat minor temporarily, and it does have that unexpected harmonic quality. The second chord, which we're going to talk about, that occurs right at the very end of this chord progression, is this A major 7 sharp 11 chord. It's not a tonicization chord. Instead, it's what I would call a passing chord. So a passing chord is a chord that connects or passes between 2 chords, usually 2 diatonic chords. As you can see in this particular example, I'm interrupting this 5-to-1 resolution. The E flat 7 sus to E flat 7 to A flat is a classic chord resolution, the most classic chord resolution, in fact. Earlier, we make this very same resolution without interruption, which is over here in measures 4 to 5 of our chord progression, especially because the note goes A flat G A flat like this. This chord progression is noted as a perfect cadence, an incredibly stable chord progression which dates back to the 15th century. With hundreds of years of classical music history backing us up, we create this expectation in which the listener expects to hear another perfect cadence to end our section. And that's where we insert this flat 2 major 7 sharp 11 chord. This reminds me of a chess tactic. In chess, we have a tactic called Zwischenzug, and it occurs when someone plays a move in the middle of a combination or tactical sequence to create a new threat. Just like with Zwischenzug, we insert a passing chord here into the middle of this perfect cadence, breaking expectations and creating a new threat. This passing chord works so well because I recontextualize this tonic note, the most stable note of the whole scale, with an unexpected borrow chord. It's this chord progression right here. This flat 2 major 7 sharp 11 chord is really a jazz cliche. This harmonic sequence can be substituted over any standard resolution and is an available choice at the end of any jazz standard. However, I utilize it here in this EDM song because I thought it might be a nice surprise for listeners of EDM who might not be as familiar with this harmonic concept. But how do you know which chord to utilize as a passing chord? Well, in this example, I borrow a chord cliche from jazz, so it's something that I've learned. However, there are endless possibilities when it comes to passing chords. Especially because it's in between point A and point B, we can get away with using a lot of dissonance, which is something that's always exciting in terms of chord possibilities, at least to me. The only real requirement of these passing chords is that they follow good voice leading rules. Every note needs to resolve by whole step or half step. So long as that's working, you can fit almost anything here. And for me, finding a good passing chord, it's really all about trial and error. I choose a lot of different options. I try different shapes, different inversions, different sounds, and I play around with it until I'm satisfied with the result. As with any compositional technique, your ears are the judge. If it sounds good, then it is good. There's no need for additional justification beyond that. So let's take a look at these examples of passing chords, and I'll explain a little bit about each one. In every single example, we're going to be interrupting the 5-7 to 1 chord progression that we were looking at earlier. It's always going to start with E flat 7 sus 4 to E flat 7, and our end goal is to end on this A flat chord. And everything in between is what creates our passing chord or passing sequence. In the first example, we draw from the world of the 4 minor chord, one of my absolute favorite chords of all time. In particular, I wrote this nice little line cliche, this whole step, half step line that resolves to the whole chord progression. These little lines are something that I love so much about chord progressions, and I try to include it as often as I can. In particular here, we're going from the root of C sharp minor to the C, which is our major 7, to the B flat, which is our 6. And then it can resolve either up or down to C or to A flat. Let's take a listen to this in context. Absolutely beautiful. Let's take a look at our next one. In our second example, we're taking use of this 2-7 chord. We have our major version with our D, we have our minor version with our D flat, and then this D flat resolves nicely to C. So once again, we have this nice little line, which is resolving as the chord progression goes on. Let's see if you can hear that as we take a look at this passing sequence. We got this beautiful chromatic line. Take a listen one more time. Let's take a look at the next one. This one is a little bit weird. We have this D7 sharp 11 chord. Now, this chord is very far outside of the key of A flat. And what I mean by that is it has a lot of notes that are outside of this key. So it gives a really crunchy, dissonant, borrowed sound. Let's see if this one makes sense. A little bit crunchy and weird. However, there's a way that we can lessen this crunch and make it sound more resolved. And I would do that by adding a pedal note here at the end of this measure with an E flat. This might make it seem a little bit more resolved, and it might make a little bit more sense to our ears. Let's see what it sounds like. And finally, let's move to the weirdest chord progression, which has the most strange note choice of these 4 examples. We have an E major triad on top. We have this A flat pedal note on bottom. So the E natural, the upper structure, is far away from our home bass, and our bottom pedal note is already resolved. So it has this weird juxtaposition between an outside triad and the root note already arriving at our destination early. It's like this pull and push. It almost gives a sense that we've been home the whole time. Let's see if we can make sense of this one. Which one of these passing chord examples was your favorite? And when you take a look at passing chords in your composition, feel inspired to search for creative sounds, for creative shapes, You could be looking for line cliches like I did in these first two examples. You could be looking just for outside triads, outside sounds that are far from the key center, like this D7 sharp 11 or this E major triad. But the more creative you get and the weirder it gets, sometimes the better. You'll never know until you try. And that's what I've done in a lot of the chord progressions that I work on. I keep trying until I find something that's really interesting. So now that we've talked about examples of passing chords, let's sum up this video by taking a look at the chord progression which started it all at the very beginning. We have this 1-5-6-4 chord progression. This is a standard chord progression used in thousands of songs, infamous for being repetitive, entirely diatonic, for being expected in a way because of its frequency of use. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong about that, but my belief with harmony is that even simple chord progressions can have harmonic sophistication and unexpectedness. And so, below this example, I have my own version that I whipped up quickly, which incorporates the two compositional techniques which we talked about today. Firstly, we tonicize this F minor 7 chord by going from its fifth, this C7 sharp 9 over E. The reason why I put it over an E is that I like the voice leading, where in the bass we have this chromatic line. We go E flat to E natural to F. So using inversions there creates a smooth bass motion. And then at the very end of the chord progression, I use a passing chord. 4-1 is a very standard chord resolution. You can hear it in the blues, you can hear it all over the place. However, I interrupt the 4-1 chord progression here with another outside sound that I haven't shown you yet. This one is based off of the flat 7 minor 7 chord, and it incorporates a lot of sounds which are similar to the 4 minor chord, but has a couple other tones that make it a little bit different, a variation on that type of sound. So in this video, we discussed two compositional techniques to create surprising harmonic moments. We talked about tonicization and we talked about passing chords. Which technique was your favorite? If you learned something from this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. You can listen to Star Circuit 7 on Spotify and all other major streaming platforms. The link will be in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.